For MEA 100 for the atmosphere module, for my hazardous weather related event, I chose the Cyclone Storm Nargis. Cyclone Storm Nargis caused the worst natural disaster in the history of Myanmar, which is formerly known as Burma. It occurred in May 2008. It's the deadliest named cyclone in North Indian Ocean Basin, and it's the second deadliest named cyclone of all time. It started as just a storm front that strengthened to a tropical depression and ultimately upgraded to a cyclone. The cyclone season in this area usually lasts from about April to December. It's a combination of a strong front of winds meeting a low pressure area, create a large amount of rising air that accumulated to a great deal of moisture and precipitation. Once that system formed, the warm water in the area has only provided favorable conditions for the storm, and which strengthened it by absorbing more water that provided more heated water that provided latent heat. At the end of the storm, after it was about a Category 1, it actually hit a deep layer of warm water right before it made landfall, which made the front pick up and really is what fueled it to become the equivalent of about a Category 4 storm hurricane that we would consider here in the United States. So it is a seasonal feature. As I mentioned, these cyclones normally only occur between April and December. There's usually only 2 or 3 of these storms that actually make it to a full-blown cyclone. A lot of them become tropical depressions, and there's usually it varies every year, but it's usually average maybe that one might make landfall. So a lot of times if they do form, the 2 or 3 that do form cyclones, they actually end up not making landfall and dissipating off on the coast. It's both driven by precipitation, warm water, and strong winds, all three together. Formation of the storm, it just kind of further illustrates some of the concepts that we talked about in MEA 100 thus far, especially in the atmosphere module. Some of those include winds moving from high pressure to low pressure, latent heat in the form of moisture that gets dispersed inside the storm, condensation, the Coriolis effect, which is what actually spins the cyclone to the right in the north or to the left in the southern hemisphere. We discussed a lot in class about how latent heat is released when water is driven up into the atmosphere, how the Coriolis effect spins the storm depending on the hemisphere, and low pressure system meeting prevailing winds normally is what creates a storm front. So it involved the hydrosphere as well as the atmospheric conditions because it formed over the open ocean. As far as what the actual effects of the storm was, the storm affected at least 2.4 million people. It's unknown exactly how many people were killed. The government actually stopped counting after they got to a certain fatality number. The ones that we do know is that it killed at least 138,000 people in the Irrawaddy Delta, and at least 80,000 deaths as it moved to the Labuda Township, and 10,000 more deaths in Bogal. The government, as I said, stopped updating the death numbers after a while. Many believe it was actually more catastrophic than Typhoon Nina in 1975, which has always been known as kind of the most damaging storm in that region. Political instability made relief efforts slow. There was actually Myanmar military rulers that rejected international aid at first. They way later accepted it. There was also an earthquake that hit China right about the same time, so that also contributed to slowed relief efforts. It's estimated to cause at least $10 billion in damage, making it the costliest cyclones ever occurred in the North Indian Ocean Basin. The storm caused significant damage to the Irrawaddy Delta, which is really economically important to Myanmar because it's where the majority of the rice is grown there, and they were a major exporter of rice. So it devastated nearly 65% of the country's rice paddies, leaving about 50,000 acres unsuited for planting. As far as the people that were affected mostly, I just said the ag community, obviously, and then people in lower income were most affected, which is pretty typical for any type of storm like this. As far as what they're doing to try to prevent some of these things, the country has invested significantly in meteorology and storm warnings, and they've also put together a more adequate action plan. I was actually able to find some articles that really detailed where they've actually really put some serious capital and labor hours into improving these areas. So that's it.